Joining me to chat a little bit more about this fight, I'm joined by Ring Magazine boxing reporter Ryan Songalia, all the way in New Jersey. Good evening, Ryan. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for taking this time to speak to us. This is a rematch. Let's take a few steps back and look back at Usyk and Joshua 1. What happened? What worked specifically for Usyk to outclass and outpoint Joshua in that fight?
Well, in the first fight, the thought by many is that a good big man beats a good little man. What we found out was that Joshua is a good big man and Usyk is a great littler man who was able to exploit some of the tactics of Joshua. Joshua was fighting against a brilliant boxer, a man who is really a genius inside the ring. And instead of imposing his size, he was out there trying to go feint for feint, jab for jab, with a guy who was much quicker and much more adept at that style of boxing. So it didn't go his way, and particularly as the fight wore on, Usyk was becoming more and more dominant. If there were 30 more seconds left in the 12th round, Joshua may have been stopped by Usyk. So it was a seismic shift in boxing where you have an undisputed cruiserweight champion steps up to heavyweight and then convincingly beats a man who held many of the major titles at heavyweight boxing. So it was a big victory for Oleksandr Usyk.
If you look at Joshua's performance, I mean, he is a boxer as a big boy. One would have expected him to use firstly his reach, but also use the size of his body just to upset and unsettle Usyk in this fight. Do you think, having looked back in this fight, can Joshua change his tactics? Because also it looked like he was a little bit confused fighting a southpaw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's even said that. He said that, well, this fight would have been easier if Usyk wasn't a southpaw. Well, unfortunately for Joshua, Usyk still is a southpaw, so he will have to deal with those similar issues. What I do like is that he brought in Robert Garcia to be his trainer for this fight. Garcia is very adept at training in that aggressive style, putting the pressure on, imposing your size, because when Joshua did that in the middle rounds, that was when he had his best success. I thought he won maybe 3 rounds, and those 3 rounds for me were in the middle rounds, at a point when I thought he could have actually turned the fight around. So if he can do that, he stands a much greater chance. If he stays at distance, he's going to have a lot of problems because Joshua is not a Vladimir Klitschko. He's not a Lennox Lewis. Those guys like to use their jab and fight from the outside, and they have no problem stinking it out and winning a 12-round decision. Joshua has a good jab. He likes to use it to get inside and mix it up. Against Andy Ruiz, for instance, in the first fight, that worked against him. I think that he was able to win the rematch with Andy Ruiz, in large part because Andy Ruiz forgot to train for that fight. Must have slipped his mind. So Anthony Joshua has a lot going against him. If he's able to win this fight, though, that is a major statement because a lot of people are writing him off at this point, and this is a very pivotal moment for heavyweight boxing. We have Tyson Fury retiring, and the vacant Ring Magazine championships on the line. This is where the heavyweight boxing is going to go. It can either go with Usyk or it can go with Joshua.
If you look at Joshua, and you mentioned the Ruiz fight, where in the first fight he was stopped by Ruiz, but he came back and we saw he showed us exactly what he can do as a boxer, not going as a headhunter or a power puncher. Do you think a change of tactics for him in this fight against Usyk will be able to at least give him a different result, as he was outclassed by a shorter man with a shorter reach in the first fight?
I mean, I subscribe to the old philosophy of you box a fighter and you fight a boxer. I think that he should go out here and try to impose his size, make Usyk uncomfortable. Because, even against Derek Chisora, when Chisora was able to, keep the pace with Usyk in the early rounds, he was able to make him uncomfortable. I think that if Joshua can do that, he stands a better chance there. He's going to have to take some risks because Usyk is, he's not a monster puncher, but especially at heavyweight, but he can still sting him. I think Joshua's going to have to take some of those punches. I think he's going to have to be physical. I don't know that that's his nature to get in there and kind of lean on the guy, lock him up, push his weight around, back him up that way. I don't know that that's his nature. I think that's the way to beat a guy like that. I mean, the guy's a cruiserweight, and heavyweights are, you could be as big as 250, 300 pounds. He should have that strength advantage, and I think he has to use that. I think he has to use it smartly, but I think that if he's going to have a chance, he's going to go out there and make Usyk uncomfortable.
Well, we've seen Tyson Fury, definitely a perfect example of how to use a big body. So let's look at the champion, unbeaten. Usyk going into this fight, 19 by way of knockout. What will work for him? What does he need to do to retain the titles?
I think he has to be himself. I think he has to be in shape to go 12 rounds and box competitively because Joshua, when he had his best success, was when he was going to the body. I think that Usyk has to be at angles. He can't be right in front of Anthony Joshua. I think he did a great job in the first fight of using that straight left hand to the body and then cutting out to the side and then working off that way, never being in front of the bigger man. I think that he could tire out the bigger man by making him turn. I think that's the way you should always box against a much bigger guy, is making so that he can't just be a freight train going forward. I think his jab is going to be very effective, and he's got to punch in combinations. He can't just get stuck in the whole throwing one punch at a time against Joshua, because that's the pace that Joshua wants. He has to make Joshua uncomfortable. Joshua is a big man. He's got a lot of muscle. That muscle takes up a lot of oxygen.
So, are you brave enough, Ryan, to call it?
Yeah, I would say myself personally, I would call this. I think my belief is if everything is equal, from the first fight to the second fight, that the guy who won the first fight wins the second fight more convincingly. I think that happens here. I think that there are going to be heavyweights that are going to be Usyk. I don't think Joshua is that guy. Just seeing, from his body of work, I wouldn't put this as heavyweight boxing. Anything can happen. We haven't been in Joshua's training camp, but my opinion is that Usyk wins in more dominant fashion. Would not surprise me if he is able to stop a tired Joshua late in the fight.
Well, I see it completely different. I think Joshua will be able to stop Usyk in the later rounds. But hey, that's the beauty of heavyweight boxing. Ryan, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for taking this time to speak to us. I appreciate your time and your insight. That's Ryan Songalia talking to us all the way from New Jersey ahead of that big fight that will see Oleksandr Usyk up against Anthony Joshua. That's